The blood-stained letter trembled in Olivia Stevens' hand as she clutched her infant son closer to her breast, staring down the dusty Montana road stretching endlessly before her. Behind her lay only ashes and heartbreak, ahead nothing but uncertainty and miles of unforgiving wilderness. Montana Territory, 1876, Olivia had been walking for what seemed like a lifetime. 3 days since she'd fled the remains of her homestead outside Helena. 3 days of following the sun, nursing her 6-month-old baby William beneath whatever shade she could find, rationing the last drops of water from her canteen. 3 days since she'd buried her husband's bullet-riddled body beside the charred remains of their cabin. The summer heat pressed down on her like an anvil. Her cotton dress, once blue as a robin's egg, was now gray with dust and stiff with dried sweat. The thin shawl draped over her shoulders offered little protection from the relentless sun. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, and the soles of her worn boots had begun to separate from the uppers. Still, she trudged on, one foot in front of the other, because stopping meant death for them both. "Just a little farther, Willie," she whispered to the whimpering bundle against her chest. Her voice came out as a dry rasp, barely audible even to her own ears. "We'll find water soon." Her red gold hair, once her pride, hung in limp strands around her face. At 22, Olivia had already known more loss than most face in a lifetime. First her parents to consumption back east, then her brother to the war, and now her husband Thomas to the bandits who descended upon their homestead like locusts. William's cries had grown weaker with each passing hour. He hadn't had a proper feeding since yesterday morning, when she'd still had enough moisture in her body to produce milk. His little face was flushed with fever, his tiny lips parched. Panic clawed at Olivia's throat every time she looked at him. The horizon wavered in the heat. Olivia blinked, trying to clear her vision. Was that a stand of cottonwoods in the distance? Where there were cottonwoods, there would be water. With renewed determination, she adjusted her grip on William and picked up her pace, ignoring the screaming pain in her blistered feet. She'd gone another 100 yards when she heard the soft thunder of hoofbeats approaching from behind. Terror seized her. Had the bandits found her trail? She looked around desperately for somewhere to hide, but there was nothing but open prairie and the distant promise of those trees. Clutching William tight against her chest, Olivia broke into a stumbling run. The baby wailed at the jostling, his cry thin and reedy. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. She wouldn't outrun a horse, not in her condition, but instinct drove her forward nonetheless. Then the hoofbeats slowed and a shadow fell across her path. Olivia froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Slowly she turned. A massive bay gelding towered over her, steam rising from its sweat-dampened flanks. Atop the horse sat a man, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. For a long, breathless moment, neither moved. The only sound was William's soft whimpers and the snorting of the horse, the rider dismounted in one fluid motion. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in trail-worn canvas pants and a faded blue shirt. A gun belt hung low on his hips, but his hands remained at his sides, non-threatening. "Madam," he said, his voice low and gravelly from disuse, "you look like you could use some help." Olivia swayed on her feet, darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. The man stepped forward quickly, concern etching lines around his eyes. She noticed distantly that were the deep blue of a mountain lake. "My baby," she whispered. "Please, help my baby." Then the world tilted sideways and Olivia felt herself falling. The last thing she saw before consciousness slipped away was the stranger lunging forward, his arms outstretched to catch her and the precious bundle she carried. When Olivia opened her eyes again, she was lying in shade. A canteen pressed against her lips and cool water trickled into her mouth. She gulped greedily until a large, calloused hand gently pulled the container away. "Easy now," came that same gravelly voice. "Too much too fast will make you sick." Memory flooded back. Olivia bolted upright, her eyes wild. "My baby, where's my baby?" "He's right here, madam." The man nodded toward a small bundle nestled in what appeared to be his folded jacket. "I got some water into him. He's sleeping now." Relief weakened her limbs, and she sagged back against what she now realized was a saddle serving as a pillow. They were beneath a lone cottonwood tree, the horse grazing nearby. The man crouched beside her, his hat now removed to reveal dark hair shot through with silver at the temples. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps in his mid-30s, with a face weathered by sun and wind, a strong jaw darkened by several days' worth of stubble, and those remarkable blue eyes watching her with cautious concern. "Thank you," Olivia whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "Name's Daniel Cooper," he said, offering the canteen again. "Most folks call me Coop, Olivia Stevens." She took the canteen with trembling hands. "And that's William?" Daniel Coop nodded, his gaze drifting to the sleeping infant. "Where you headed, Mrs. Stevens?" The question brought reality crashing back. Olivia closed her eyes briefly against the wave of grief. "I don't know," she admitted. "Away, just away." Something in her tone must have told him not to press further, at least not yet. He simply nodded and rose to his feet. "Sun's getting low. We should make camp for the night. There's a creek about half a mile ahead. Better water there, and I can catch us something to eat." Olivia looked up at him, this stranger who'd appeared from nowhere when she needed help most desperately. "Why are you helping us?" Coop's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in those blue depths. "Out here, you help folks who need it. That's just how it is." He paused. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Olivia said, though she wasn't entirely certain she had the strength. "Good. You hold the little one. I'll lead us to the creek." With surprising gentleness for such large hands, Coop helped Olivia to her feet, then lifted her onto his horse. She swayed momentarily, but his steady grip kept her from falling. He handed William up to her, and the baby stirred but didn't wake. They reached the creek as the last rays of sunlight gilded the landscape. True to his word, Coop had caught 2 plump rabbits which now roasted over a small fire. The scent made Olivia's empty stomach clench painfully. William had awakened and nursed weakly. The water had revived Olivia enough that her milk had begun to flow again, though not as abundantly as before. Still, it was enough to settle the infant, who now dozed in a nest of blankets Coop had arranged. "You want to tell me what happened?" Coop asked quietly as he handed her a tin plate with steaming rabbit meat. Olivia stared into the fire. The words came haltingly at first, then in a rush. She told him about the homestead she and Thomas had built 2 years ago, about their dreams of raising a family and cattle in the Montana Territory. About the band of outlaws who had ridden up 3 days ago, demanding food and whiskey. How Thomas had tried to reason with them, only to be shot down in cold blood. How they'd ransacked the cabin, taking what little valuables the young couple had before setting fire to the place. "I hid in the root cellar with Willie," she said, her voice hollow. "When they were gone, I buried Thomas, gathered what I could salvage, and just started walking. I thought maybe I could reach Helena, but I got turned around, lost track of the days." Coop had remained silent throughout her story, his expression unreadable in the firelight. Now he asked, "These men, would you recognize them again?" Something in his tone made Olivia look up sharply. "Yes," she said. "Especially their leader, tall man with a scar running through his right eyebrow, wore a silver belt buckle shaped like a snake." A muscle twitched in Coop's jaw. "Sounds like Joe Blackburn and his gang. They've been terrorizing homesteaders across 3 territories." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "I've been tracking them for near on 2 months now." Olivia's breath caught. "You're a lawman, U.S. Marshal." He didn't elaborate further, just continued staring into the flames. "Are you going to catch them?" she asked, her voice small. Coop looked up then, and the cold determination in his eyes sent a shiver down Olivia's spine. "Yes, madam, I am, but first I need to get you and your boy somewhere safe." "Where?" "Helena's 3 days' ride northwest of here. I've got a friend there, Martha Wilson. She runs a boarding house. She'll take you in until you decide what's next." Olivia nodded slowly. The thought of shelter, of safety, was overwhelming after days of desperate flight. But a new fear gnawed at her. "What will I do? I have no money, no family." "One step at a time, Mrs. Stevens," Coop said, his voice gentler now. "First we get you to Helena, the rest will sort itself out." That night, As Olivia lay wrapped in Coop's spare blanket with William nestled against her, she listened to the Marshal's steady breathing from across the fire. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to cry silently, tears tracking down her temples into her hair. Tears for Thomas, for the life they'd built and lost, for the uncertain future stretching before her. But beneath the grief and fear, a tiny spark of hope had kindled. They were no longer alone in the wilderness. For now, that would have to be enough. Morning brought a pale sunrise and the smell of coffee brewing over a freshly built fire. Olivia awoke to find William already awake and cooing softly in the makeshift cradle beside her. Coop was nowhere to be seen. Panic fluttered in her chest until she heard the splash of water from the direction of the creek. Gathering William in her arms, she rose stiffly. Her body ached from days of walking and sleeping on the hard ground, but she felt stronger than she had yesterday. She was just settling William to nurse when Coop returned, his hair damp and his face freshly shaved. He nodded a greeting, moving to check on the coffee without meeting her eyes. "There's soap and a clean towel down by the creek if you want to wash up," he said, keeping his back to her. "I'll watch the little one." Olivia hesitated. The thought of cool water against her skin was tempting, but "I don't have any clean clothes." Coop rummaged in his saddlebag and pulled out a folded shirt. "It'll be big, but it's clean, and I can rinse out your dress. It'll dry quick in this heat." Heat crept up Olivia's neck at the thought of this stranger handling her undergarments, but practicality overrode modesty. She needed to be clean, and William deserved a mother who didn't reek of fear and filth. "Thank you," she said, taking the offered shirt. The creek was shallow but clear, running over smooth stones. Olivia stripped quickly, gasping as the cool water hit her skin. She scrubbed herself with the harsh lye soap, watching as days of grime swirled away downstream. Her hair took longer, tangled as it was, but she worked through the knots patiently, relishing the feeling of cleanliness. Coop's shirt hung to mid-thigh on her slender frame. She belted it with a length of rope from his supplies and hung her wet undergarments from low branches to dry. Her dress was beyond salvaging, filthy and torn in several places, but she rinsed it anyway and spread it in the sun. When she returned to camp, she found Coop sitting cross-legged on the ground, holding William on his knee. The big man was speaking softly to the infant, who stared up at him with wide, curious eyes. "That's right, little man," Coop was saying. "You're going to grow up to be strong like your pa. Your ma's going to tell you all about him, how brave he was." Something caught in Olivia's throat at the tenderness in the Marshal's voice. She'd assumed him to be a hard man he would have to be, given his profession, but this glimpse of gentleness surprised her. Coop looked up as she approached, and for a brief moment, something flickered across his face, something that might have been appreciation of how the morning light caught her freshly washed hair, or perhaps simple approval of her cleaner appearance. Whatever it was, it vanished quickly behind his usual stoic expression. "Feel better?" he asked, handing William back to her. "Much," Olivia admitted. "Thank you for the shirt and for watching him." Coop nodded and rose to his feet. "We should get moving." Got a lot of ground to cover before nightfall. They packed up camp quickly. Coop had fashioned a sling for William from a spare piece of canvas, allowing Olivia to carry the baby securely against her chest while riding. He helped her mount the bay gelding before swinging up behind her. Olivia stiffened at the sudden proximity. She could feel the solid wall of his chest against her back, smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. His arms came around her to take the reins, effectively creating a protective cage around her and William. "All right?" he asked, his breath stirring the hair near her ear. Olivia nodded, not trusting her voice. It had been days since she'd been this close to another human being, apart from her son. The contact was both reassuring and disconcerting. They rode in silence for the first hour, the rhythm of the horse's gait eventually lulling William to sleep in his sling. The landscape rolled by golden prairie grass, giving way to occasional stands of pine as they moved northwestward toward the mountains. "How long have you been a marshal?" Olivia finally asked, partly to distract herself from the awareness of Coop's proximity. There was a pause before he answered. 5 years. Before that, I rode with the cavalry. Before that, well, I did a bit of everything. Cattle driving, mining, even tried my hand at farming for a spell. What made you choose law enforcement? Another pause, longer this time. Lost someone, he said finally. To men like the ones who killed your husband, figured maybe I could stop it happening to someone else. Olivia absorbed this. I'm sorry, she said softly. Was it family, my wife? The words were clipped, final, a clear indication he didn't wish to elaborate. They lapsed back into silence, but it felt different now, weighted with shared grief. Olivia found herself wondering about the woman Coop had loved and lost. Had she been beautiful, kind, had they had children? She thought about asking but decided against it. Some wounds were too private to probe. Instead, she told him about her life before Montana, about growing up in Pennsylvania, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a carpenter, about losing her parents to consumption within months of each other, about meeting Thomas at a church social and his wild dreams of building a cattle empire in the West. He was so certain, she said, smiling at the memory. Said Montana was the land of opportunity, that our children would grow up strong and free under that big sky. He wasn't wrong about that, Coop said. Montana's a good place, harsh sometimes, but good. It doesn't feel that way right now, Olivia admitted, her smile fading. Bad men can be found anywhere, Mrs. Stevens. Doesn't make the land itself bad. They stopped at midday to rest the horse and eat a cold lunch of hardtack and jerky. Olivia fed William and changed his clout while Coop scouted the area, ever vigilant. We're making good time, he told her when he returned. Should reach the Wilson Place day after tomorrow if we keep this pace. Olivia nodded, though anxiety churned in her stomach at the thought of what awaited her in Helena. She had no skills beyond those of a farmer's wife. How would she support herself and William? As if reading her thoughts, Coop added, Martha's good people. She'll help you get settled, maybe find work if that's what you want. I don't know what I want, Olivia confessed, except for Willie to be safe. That's enough to start with. They rode until dusk, making camp in a sheltered hollow near a small spring. Coop hunted while Olivia built a fire, proud when she managed to get it lit on her third try with the flint and steel he'd provided. That night, as they sat across the fire from each other, Olivia found herself studying the Marshal openly for the first time. In the firelight, his face was all planes and angles, the shadows accentuating a small scar that ran along his jawline. His hands, large and calloused, moved with surprising grace as he cleaned his rifle. There was a quietness to him, a self-contained quality that spoke of a man accustomed to his own company. How will you find them? She asked suddenly. Blackburn and his men, Coop's hands stilled on the rifle. I've got informants in most of the major settlements. Sooner or later they'll surface. Men like that can't help but draw attention to themselves. And when you find them, his eyes met hers across the fire, hard as flint. Justice will be served. Olivia shivered, not entirely from the night chill. Will you kill them? That depends on them, Coop said evenly. I'll bring them in alive if I can, but I won't hesitate if they force my hand, she nodded slowly. The thought of violence, of more death, made her stomach turn. But she couldn't deny the fierce satisfaction she felt at the thought of the men who'd murdered Thomas facing punishment. You should get some sleep, Coop said, changing the subject. Long day tomorrow. Olivia curled up beside William, watching as Coop settled with his back against a tree, rifle across his knees. He would take first watch, he'd told her, though she doubted he intended to wake her for a turn. Marshal Cooper, she said softly. Just Coop is fine. Coop, then, thank you. For everything? His only response was a slight nod, but in the firelight, Olivia thought she saw the faintest softening around his eyes. The next day brought clouds building on the western horizon, the promise of rain by nightfall. They rode hard, Coop clearly hoping to cover as much ground as possible before the weather turned. William was fussier today, uncomfortable with the pace and perhaps sensing his mother's tension. Olivia did her best to soothe him, singing softly and adjusting his position in the sling frequently to give him different views. You have a nice voice, Coop commented after she finished a lullaby. It was the first personal observation he'd made about her, and Olivia felt an unexpected flush of pleasure at the compliment. "My mother taught me to sing," she said. "She used to say music was food for the soul, wise woman. She was." Olivia smiled wistfully. She would have loved Willie. "And Montana, I think. She always said she wanted to see mountains before she died." They crested a rise, and suddenly the view opened up before them, the distant peaks of the Rockies rising majestically against the western sky, their snow-capped summits gleaming despite the gathering clouds. "Oh." Olivia breathed, momentarily stunned by the sight. "Something, isn't it?" There was a warmth in Coop's voice she hadn't heard before. "Never gets old, no matter how many times I see it. It's beautiful," she agreed. "Makes a person feel very small, that it does." The first fat raindrops began to fall as the sun dipped low. Coop steered them toward a stand of pines, clearly searching for better shelter than the open plain would afford. "There," he said, pointing toward what appeared to be an abandoned line shack nestled among the trees. "We'll wait out the worst of it there." The shack was crude but found a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and what had once been a pallet bed. Dust and cobwebs covered every surface, but the roof was intact. "Probably belonged to a sheep herder," Coop said, helping Olivia dismount before leading the horse to a lean-to at the side of the shack. "They move with the flocks, use these places seasonally." Olivia stood in the center of the small space, William fussing against her chest. The rain was falling steadily now, drumming on the shake roof. She felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of exhaustion. 3 days on the run, followed by 2 days of hard riding. It was catching up with her. Coop returned, ducking through the low doorway with his saddlebags and bedroll. He took one look at her face and frowned. "Sit down before you fall down," he ordered, guiding her to the single chair beside the table. "I'll get a fire going." Olivia didn't argue. She sank onto the chair gratefully, shifting William to her shoulder to pat his back. The baby hiccuped and whimpered, clearly picking up on her fatigue. Coop worked efficiently, clearing the ancient ashes from the fireplace and laying a new fire with wood from a stack beside the hearth. Soon, warmth and light filled the small space. "It's not much," he said, straightening, "but it beats a wet bedroll under a tree." "It's perfect," Olivia assured him. And in that moment, with rain pattering on the roof and firelight dancing across the rough walls, it truly was. They shared a simple meal of beans and salt pork from Coop's provisions. Afterward, he insisted she take the old pallet which he'd brushed clean and covered with his bedroll. "I'll be fine on the floor," he said when she protested. "Slept on worse." Olivia was too tired to argue further. She settled on the pallet with William beside her, watching through half-closed eyes as Coop spread his blanket near the fire. The rain continued through the night, sometimes letting up to a gentle patter, other times lashing against the walls of the shack with renewed fury. Sometime in the darkest hours, William woke crying, hungry and wet. Olivia changed him quickly with the last of her clean clouts, then sat up to nurse him. The fire had burned low, casting the room in deep shadows. She was startled when Coop's voice came from the darkness. "Everything all right?" "Yes," she whispered. "He's just hungry. I'm sorry we woke you." "I was awake." There was a rustle as Coop sat up, adding a small log to the fire. The flames leaped higher, illuminating his face. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. "You should sleep," Olivia said softly. "You're the one doing all the work." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Keeping a baby alive is work enough, Mrs. Stevens." "Olivia," she corrected him. "Please, after everything, you should call me Olivia." He nodded once. "Olivia." Her name in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "You should know, I sent word ahead to Martha from our last camp, asked her to prepare for your arrival." Surprise made her blink. "How? There was no one around for miles." "Left a message with a trapper I know who camps up that way. He'll have reached Helena by now." Olivia absorbed this information. "That was thoughtful, thank you," Coop shrugged as if dismissing the gesture. They lapsed into silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire, William's soft suckling, and the rain on the roof. "Do you have children?" Olivia asked after a while, curiosity overcoming propriety. The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, Coop's face was completely unguarded, revealing a flash of raw pain that made Olivia regret her question immediately. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That was too personal. Please forget I asked." "No, it's—" Coop ran a hand over his face. "Rachel was carrying our first when she died. That was 7 years ago now." Olivia's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He nodded acknowledgement, his face slipping back into its usual stoic mask. But something had shifted between them, a fragile connection forged through shared loss. "He's a fine boy," Coop said after a moment, nodding toward William, who had fallen asleep at her breast. "Strong, like his mother." Warmth bloomed in Olivia's chest at the unexpected compliment. "I don't feel very strong most of the time." "Strength isn't about feeling," Coop said. "It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you're afraid. By that measure, you're among the strongest people I've met." Their eyes met across the dimly lit room, and for a breathless moment, Olivia felt something stir within her, something she had no right to feel so soon after Thomas's death. She looked away first, adjusting her clothing and lying back down with William. "Good night, Coop," she said softly. "Good night, Olivia." Morning dawned clear and cool, the rain having washed the world clean. Dew sparkled on every surface, and the air smelled of pine and damp earth. Olivia stepped outside the shack to find Coop already up, tending to his horse. William, for once, was content to lie on a blanket, gurgling at a butterfly that fluttered just beyond his reach. "How far to Helena?" Olivia asked, shading her eyes against the bright morning sun. "Should make it by nightfall if the trails aren't too muddy," Coop replied, tightening his horse's girth strap. He glanced at her. "You holding up all right?" "Yes," she said, and was somewhat surprised to realize it was true. Despite everything, the grief, the fear, the uncertainty of what lay ahead, she felt stronger this morning than she had in days. Perhaps it was simply having a destination, a plan, however tentative. Or perhaps it was the steady, reassuring presence of the man before her. They packed up quickly and were on the trail within the hour. The day warmed gradually, steam rising from the damp earth as the sun climbed higher. The landscape began to change subtly, more trees, gentler slopes, occasional glimpses of distant homesteads. "Civilization," Coop commented when they passed the first fenced pasture with actual cattle grazing inside. "Won't be long now." Olivia felt a curious mixture of relief and regret. Relief at the thought of proper shelter, clean clothes, regular meals. Regret because she knew that once they reached Helena, Coop would ride out again back to his solitary pursuit of justice. The thought left an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. "What will you do?" she asked. "After you've taken us to Mrs. Wilson's." Coop was silent for a moment. "Follow up on some leads. There's been word of Blackburn's gang operating near Virginia City." "How long will you track them?" "As long as it takes." The simple answer spoke volumes. This wasn't just an assignment to him, it was personal. Olivia thought about the wife he'd lost, the child who had never drawn breath, and understood his determination in a way she might not have before her own loss. "I hope you find them," she said softly. "And I hope afterward you find some peace." His arms tightened almost imperceptibly around her. "Thank you." They rode in companionable silence for a while, William dozing in his sling. The sun was high overhead when they stopped to rest and water the horse at a small stream. Olivia sat on a fallen log, massaging her aching back. 3 days on horseback had left her muscles protesting, unused as they were to riding for such extended periods. "Sore?" Coop asked, handing her the canteen. She nodded ruefully. "I haven't ridden this much since Thomas and I first came west. Here." Before she could react, Coop had moved behind her, his large hands coming to rest lightly on her shoulders. "May I?" Olivia hesitated, then nodded. His fingers began to work at the knots in her shoulders, firm but gentle. She closed her eyes, a small sigh escaping her lips as the tension began to ease. "My mother used to get terrible headaches," Coop said, his voice low. "Pa taught me how to ease them for her, said it was the least a man could do, given that women carry the heavier burdens in this life." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was hard-working Kansas farmer, taught me everything important I know." Olivia opened her eyes, turning slightly to look up at him. What would he think of you being a marshal? A hint of a smile touched Coop's lips. He'd worry, but he'd understand. Pa believed in standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. His hands had stilled on her shoulders, and suddenly, Olivia was acutely aware of how close they were. She could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the small scar near his temple that she hadn't noticed before. For one wild, impossible moment, she thought he might lean down and, William's sudden cry broke the spell. Olivia turned away quickly, moving to check on her son. Her heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. "We should get going," Coop said, his voice carefully neutral. "Still have a ways to go before Helena." They reached the outskirts of Helena as the sun was beginning to set, painting the modest buildings in hues of gold and amber. Olivia sat straighter in the saddle, taking in her first sight of the territorial capital. It was larger than she'd expected, a proper town with wooden sidewalks, a church steeple rising above the other structures, and people. So many people after days of isolation. Coop guided them down the main street, past curious onlookers who paused to watch the dusty marshal and his unusual companions. Olivia was acutely aware of her appearance, wearing Coop's oversized shirt belted over her own tattered skirt, her hair hastily braided, a baby sling fashioned from canvas. She must look like a vagrant. They turned down a quieter side street and stopped before a tidy two-story house with a wide porch. A sign hanging from the eaves read, "Wilson Boarding House." Before Coop could dismount, the front door flew open. A stout woman with iron-gray hair and a flowered apron hurried down the steps, her face creased with concern. "Daniel Cooper, I've been watching for you since noon. Your trapper friend said you'd found a woman and baby half dead in the wilderness. Is this them?" "Martha," Coop greeted her with a nod. "This is Mrs. Olivia Stevens and her son William. Mrs. Stevens, Martha Wilson." Martha's kind face softened as she looked up at Olivia. "You poor dear. Come inside right away. I've got a hot meal waiting and a room all prepared. And that little one looks like he could use a proper bath." Coop dismounted, then reached up to help Olivia down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, stiff from the long day's ride. Coop's strong hands steadied her, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson," Olivia said, finding her voice. "I don't know how I'll repay your kindness," but Martha waved away her concerns. "None of that now. Any friend of Coop's is welcome here. Besides," she added with a warm smile, "I've been wanting a baby in the house. My grandchildren live all the way in Denver, and I miss the sound of little ones." She ushered them inside to a cozy parlor, insisting that Coop stay for dinner despite his protests that he needed to report to the local sheriff's office. Nonsense. Sheriff Donovan can wait another hour. "You look like you haven't had a proper meal in days, and I won't have it said that Martha Wilson let anyone leave her table hungry." Coop relented with good grace, removing his hat and gun belt and hanging them on a hook by the door. In the warm light of the parlor, Olivia noticed how the hard lines of his face softened, how his broad shoulders seemed to lose some of their tension. Here, in this domestic setting, he looked less like the formidable lawman and more like just a man. Martha bustled Olivia upstairs to a small but comfortable bedroom with an adjoining washroom. A steaming hip bath waited, along with fresh towels and, wonder of wonders, a set of women's clothing laid out on the bed. "These belonged to my daughter before she moved to Denver," Martha explained. "They might be a bit large, but they'll do until we can get you properly fitted. Now, give me that sweet boy while you get yourself cleaned up. I'll give him a nice warm bath downstairs." Olivia hesitated, reluctant to let William out of her sight. Martha seemed to understand. "You can trust me, dear. I raised 5 of my own, plus helped with a dozen grandchildren, and I'll be just downstairs with the marshal keeping watch." Finally, Olivia nodded, carefully handing William over. "Thank you," she whispered, tears suddenly pricking her eyes. The kindness of this stranger, coming on the heels of everything else, was almost too much to bear. "There now," Martha said softly. "You've been through a terrible ordeal, but you're safe here. Take your time, dinner won't be for another hour." Left alone, Olivia sank into the bath with a sigh that was almost a sob. The hot water enveloped her aching body, and for the first time in days, perhaps weeks, she felt the tight knot of tension in her chest begin to loosen. She washed thoroughly, marveling at the luxury of real soap and plenty of hot water. When she finally stepped out and dried herself, she felt reborn. The clothes Martha had provided, a simple blue dress with a white collar, were indeed a bit large, but clean and whole. Olivia braided her damp hair and regarded herself in the small mirror over the washstand. The woman who looked back at her was pale and thinner than she remembered, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of recent trauma. But she was alive. She and William had survived. Downstairs, she found a transformed scene. William, freshly bathed and wrapped in a soft blanket, was nestled in Coop's large arms. The Marshal was seated in an armchair by the fire, speaking softly to the baby, who gazed up at him with rapt attention. Martha bustled about the adjoining dining room, setting the table and bringing out steaming dishes. Olivia paused in the doorway, struck by the tableau. Something about the sight of Coop, this hard, dangerous man holding her son with such tenderness, made her heart turn over in her chest. As if sensing her presence, Coop looked up. Their eyes met across the room, and Olivia saw something flash in his gaze, something warm and admiring that sent a flush creeping up her neck. "There you are," Martha called cheerfully. "Come sit down, dear, everything's ready." Dinner was a revelation after days of trail food: roast chicken, fluffy potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from Martha's garden. Olivia ate slowly, savoring each bite, while Martha kept up a steady stream of cheerful conversation, tactfully avoiding any mention of how Olivia had come to be in Coop's company. "The boarders are all out this evening, a town meeting about the new schoolhouse," Martha explained as she served apple pie for dessert. "So you've got a quiet first night, which is probably for the best. They're good people, mind you, mostly men working at the sawmill or the assayer's office. One school teacher, Miss Parker. You'll meet them all tomorrow." Olivia nodded, trying to take it all in. The normality of it, sitting at a proper table, eating from real plates, discussing everyday matters, seemed almost surreal after everything that had happened. After dinner, when William had been fed and put down to sleep in a borrowed cradle in Olivia's room, the three adults sat in the parlor. Martha knitted while Coop and Olivia sat in companionable silence, watching the fire. Finally, Coop stirred. "I should go. Need to check in with Sheriff Donovan, see if there's been any news of Blackburn." Olivia felt her stomach tighten. This was it then. He would leave, continue his pursuit, and she would. What? Stay here in this boarding house with strangers until she figured out what came next. "Will you come back?" The words escaped before she could consider them. "Before you ride out after Blackburn, I mean." Coop's blue eyes met hers, serious and searching. "Yes," he said simply. "I'll come by tomorrow." Relief washed through her. One more day at least. One more day before she had to face the future alone. Martha walked Coop to the door, speaking to him in low tones that Olivia couldn't quite make out. Then he was gone, the sound of his boots on the porch steps fading into the night. "He's a good man," Martha said when she returned, settling back into her chair and picking up her knitting. "One of the best, though he'd be the last to say so." "Yes," Olivia agreed softly. "I think he must be." Martha's shrewd eyes studied her over her knitting needles. "Known him long." 3 days, Olivia admitted with a small, rueful smile. "Though it feels longer, MMM. Martha's needles clicked steadily. "Funny how that happens sometimes, especially in times of trouble, shows a person's true character." They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the rhythmic clicking of Martha's needles. Finally, the older woman spoke again. "He told me a little of what happened to you. I'm sorry about your husband, dear, such a terrible thing." Olivia swallowed hard. "Thank you. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need to get back on your feet, and when you're ready, I know several people looking for help. The hotel needs a housekeeper, and the mercantile owner's wife is expecting their 4th child. She could use an assistant." The kindness nearly undid Olivia. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked, her voice thick with unshed tears. Martha's weather-beaten face creased in a gentle smile. "Because someone did the same for me once, long ago. And because any woman raising a child alone in this territory needs all the help she can get." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "And because Daniel Cooper doesn't bring just anyone to my door, if he thinks you're worth helping, that's good enough for me." Olivia slept deeply that night for the first time in days, lulled by the comfort of a real bed, the knowledge that William was safe in his cradle beside her, and the reassuring sounds of a household around them. She woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains and the distant clatter of breakfast being prepared downstairs. William was already awake, contentedly chewing on his fist. Olivia gathered him up, marveling at how different he looked after a proper bath and a good night's sleep. His cheeks were pink again, his eyes bright. "Good morning, sweet boy," she murmured, kissing his forehead. "Shall we go see what the day brings?" Downstairs, she found the boarding house in full morning bustle. 4 men sat at the dining table, eating heartily from plates piled high with eggs and bacon. They rose as one when Olivia entered, awkwardly ducking their heads in greeting. "Gentlemen, this is Mrs. Stevens," Martha announced, emerging from the kitchen with a fresh pot of coffee. "She and her son William will be staying with us for a while. Mrs. Stevens, meet Mr. Hayes, Mr. Thornton, Mr. Ellis, and Mr. Peterson." Olivia nodded politely to each man. They were a varied lot. Hayes was elderly with a magnificent white beard. Thornton and Ellis were middle-aged and weathered, clearly men who worked with their hands. Peterson was younger, bespectacled, with the air of someone more at home with books than axes. "Pleasure to meet you, madam," Hayes said, speaking for the group. "Any friend of Mrs. Wilson's is welcome here." "Thank you," Olivia said, settling at the table with William in her lap. Martha immediately placed a plate of food before her and bustled away to fetch a cup of watered-down milk for the baby. The men soon finished their breakfast and departed for their various jobs, leaving Olivia alone with Martha. The older woman sat down across from her with her own cup of coffee. "Now then," she said briskly, "I've been thinking, if you're amenable, I could use some help around here. Nothing too strenuous, just helping with meals, laundry, that sort of thing, in exchange for your room and board, of course." Olivia blinked in surprise. "You trust me to help run your business? You hardly know me." Martha waved a dismissive hand. "I'm a good judge of character, dear, always have been. Besides," she added with a twinkle in her eye, "I'm not getting any younger and this place keeps me hopping from dawn till dusk. Having another pair of hands would be a blessing." "Then yes, I accept, gratefully." Olivia smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She would have a roof over her head, food for herself and William, and a way to begin repaying Martha's kindness. "Excellent," Martha beamed. "We'll start tomorrow. Today you rest, get your bearings." She rose and began clearing the table. "Oh, and I nearly forgot, Coop stopped by at first light, said to tell you he'd be back mid-afternoon." Olivia's heart gave a peculiar little leap at this news. Did he say anything else? "Just that he had business at the sheriff's office this morning." Martha studied Olivia's face with knowing eyes. "He's quite particular about keeping his promises, our Marshal." The morning passed quickly. Martha showed Olivia around the boarding house, a tidy establishment with 6 guest rooms, a communal parlor, dining room, and a large kitchen with a back porch where laundry was done. Olivia met the only other resident she hadn't yet encountered, Miss Parker, the schoolteacher, a quiet young woman with intelligent eyes and a shy smile. After the tour, Martha insisted that Olivia take William for a walk to familiarize herself with the town. Helena in daylight was a revelation, bustling with activity, its main street lined with businesses ranging from saloons to a milliner's shop. People nodded politely as she passed, some stopping to admire William. It was strange to be among so many people after days in the wilderness, but Olivia found she welcomed the normality of it. She had just returned to the boarding house when she heard the distinctive sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her pulse quickened as she turned to see Coop riding up the street, his broad-brimmed hat pulled low against the midday sun. He dismounted with his usual fluid grace, tying his horse to the hitching post before striding up the walkway. He removed his hat as he approached, revealing hair still damp from a recent wash. "Mrs. Stevens," he greeted her, formal in the daylight with neighbors potentially watching. "You're looking well." Olivia felt suddenly shy. In Martha's borrowed dress, with her hair properly arranged and William clean and content in her arms, she must present a very different picture from the desperate woman he'd found on the prairie. "Thank you, Marshal. As are you," she gestured toward the house. "Would you like to come in?" "I believe Martha has lemonade made." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "That sounds mighty fine." They settled on the front porch, Olivia in a rocking chair with William on her lap, Coop leaning against the railing, his long legs crossed at the ankle. For a moment, they might have been any young couple enjoying a summer afternoon, the reality of their circumstances momentarily suspended. "Have you had news?" Olivia finally asked. Of Blackburn, the brief illusion of normalcy shattered. Coop's expression hardened, the lawman replacing the man. "Maybe. There's been word of men matching their description near Virginia City. Sheriff Donovan received a telegraph this morning. Then you'll be leaving." It wasn't a question. "Tomorrow at first light." He studied her face. "Martha says you'll be staying on here, helping with the boarding house." Olivia nodded. "She's been extraordinarily kind. She's a good woman, lost her husband in 65 Andersonville prison, knows what it is to start over." They fell silent, the only sounds the creak of Olivia's rocking chair and William's occasional coos. There was so much Olivia wanted to say, yet she couldn't find the words for any of it. How did you thank a man for saving not just your life, but your child's? How did you express the strange, tender feelings that had begun to grow in your heart, feelings that had no right to exist so soon after losing your husband? "I brought something for the boy," Coop said abruptly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small wooden carving a horse, skillfully rendered despite its simplicity. "It's nothing fancy, whittled it last night at the hotel." Olivia took the carving, turning it over in her hand. The detail was remarkable for something made so quickly: the flowing mane, the powerful haunches, even the alert set of the ears. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you, he'll treasure it when he's older." "And I'll tell him about the brave marshal who saved us," she added, meeting Coop's eyes. "How he appeared when we needed him most, like something from a storybook." Coop looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Just doing my job, madam." "No," Olivia said firmly. "It was far more than that. You could have taken us to the nearest settlement and been on your way. Instead, you've ensured we have a safe place, a chance to rebuild." He shrugged, clearly uneasy with her gratitude. "Any decent man would have done the same, perhaps, but it wasn't any man who found us, it was you." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them, something unspoken but powerfully felt. Olivia saw Coop's throat work as he swallowed hard. "Olivia," he began, his voice rougher than usual, but whatever he might have said was interrupted by the front door opening. Martha appeared bearing a tray with lemonade and cookies. "Thought you two might be thirsty," she said cheerfully, though her shrewd eyes darted between them, clearly registering the charged atmosphere. "Hot day for June." The moment broke. Coop straightened, accepting the glass Martha offered with a murmured thanks. The conversation turned to practical matters: the weather, the price of beef, Martha's plans to add a new room to the boarding house come fall. Evening approached too quickly. Coop declined Martha's invitation to stay for dinner, citing preparations he needed to make for his departure. He would be gone for at least 2 weeks, he explained, possibly longer if the lead took him further afield. "I'll walk you to your horse," Olivia said when he rose to leave. Outside, the sunset painted the sky in dramatic streaks of orange and pink. They stood beside Coop's, gelding in silence for a moment, both reluctant to say goodbye. "Be careful," Olivia finally said. "Blackburn and his men, they're dangerous. I've handled worse." Coop adjusted his hat, not quite meeting her eyes. "You'll be all right here with Martha. She'll look out for you and the boy, I know." Olivia hesitated, then added softly, "But I'll worry about you all the same." Coop's head came up at that, his blue eyes searching her face. "Olivia." "I know it's foolish," she rushed on. "We've only known each other a few days, and I'm still mourning Thomas, but I've come to care what happens to you, very much." For a breathless moment, Olivia thought he might step closer, might touch her. But Coop remained where he was, his hands flexing once at his sides before curling into loose fists. "I'll come back," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "When it's done, if you'd like that." Hope fluttered in Olivia's chest. I would, very much, Coop nodded once decisively. Then, in a movement so swift it caught her by surprise, he reached out and gently touched her cheek, his calloused fingers barely grazing her skin before falling away. Take care of yourself, and the little one. Then he was mounting his horse, tipping his hat to her one last time before turning and riding away, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the dying light. Olivia watched until he disappeared around the corner, one hand pressed to her cheek where his fingers had left a phantom warmth. Be safe, she whispered to the empty street. Come back to us. 2 weeks stretched into 3. Olivia settled into life at the boarding house, grateful for the routine and purpose it provided. Martha proved to be not just a kind hostess but a patient teacher, showing Olivia how to manage the accounts, deal with difficult boarders, and prepare meals for a house full of hungry men. William thrived in the stable environment. He was sitting up now, reaching for objects with growing coordination and showing the first signs of teeth. Olivia marked each milestone with joy tinged with sadness that Thomas wasn't there to see them. She thought of Coop daily, wondering where he was, if he was safe, if he would truly return as promised. Sometimes at night, when William was asleep and the house quiet, she would take out the wooden horse and turn it over in her hands, tracing its smooth contours and remembering the man who had carved it. On market days, she found herself scanning the crowds, half hoping to glimpse a tall figure in a dusty hat. The disappointment when he wasn't there was sharper than she cared to admit. Patience, Martha counseled when she caught Olivia staring down the street one afternoon. Men like Daniel Cooper don't break their promises. He'll be back when the job is done, not before. Late in July, nearly a month after Coop's departure, Sheriff Donovan stopped by the boarding house. Olivia was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough when Martha showed him in. Mrs. Stevens, he said, removing his hat. Got a telegraph message I thought you'd want to see. Olivia's hands froze in the dough, her heart stuttering. Is he? He's alive, the sheriff assured her quickly. Wounded but alive. They're bringing him in on tomorrow's stage from Virginia City. Relief made her knees weak. What happened? Caught up with Blackburn and his gang at a mining camp outside Virginia City, there was a firefight. Coop took a bullet in the shoulder, but he got them all 4, 2 dead, 2 in custody. The sheriff's weathered face broke into a grim smile. He wanted me to tell you. Well, he said to tell you justice has been served for your husband. Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes. Thank you, Sheriff. Will you let me know when the stage arrives? First thing, madam. After the sheriff left, Martha found Olivia sitting at the kitchen table, hands still covered in flour, tears streaming silently down her face. Oh, my dear, the older woman sighed, sitting beside her and taking her flour-dusted hands. It's all right to feel conflicted. Grief and joy often walk hand in hand. It's not just that, Olivia admitted. I'm glad Thomas's killers have been caught, I am, but I'm more relieved that Coop is alive, and that makes me feel disloyal somehow. Martha squeezed her hands. The heart is not a simple organ, Olivia. It can hold many feelings at once, even ones that seem contradictory. She paused. Thomas would want you to be happy, wouldn't he? To find joy again? Yes, Olivia whispered. He was always so full of hope for the future, he wouldn't want me to stop living just because he did. There you are then. Martha patted her hands and rose. Now I believe we have a wounded marshal to prepare for. The blue room at the back will be quietest, I think. The next day dawned bright and clear. Olivia dressed with particular care. Choosing the new dress, Martha had helped her make a simple gingham in a soft green that brought out the gold in her hair. She arranged William in his best clothes too, a tiny shirt and pants that Martha had sewn from scraps. The stage was due at noon. By 11, Olivia was too restless to stay in the house, pacing the front porch while William played on a blanket at her feet. When the distant sound of hoofbeats made her look up, her heart leaped to her throat. It wasn't the stage. It was a single rider on a familiar bay gelding moving slowly up the street. Coop, Olivia breathed, hardly believing her eyes. He rode directly to the boarding house, his posture stiff, his left arm held close to his body. Even at a distance, Olivia could see the pallor of his face, the lines of pain around his mouth. But he was alive. Gloriously, wonderfully alive, she was down the steps before he had fully dismounted, William gathered in her arms. "You're supposed to be on the stage," she said, her voice catching. Sheriff Donovan said, "Couldn't wait that long," Coop replied, his voice rough with exhaustion and something else. "Rode through the night." His blue eyes, though shadowed with pain, were warm as they took in the sight of her. "You look well, Olivia." "And you look terrible," she said frankly, noting the blood-stained bandage visible beneath his torn shirt, the way he swayed slightly on his feet. "Come inside before you fall down." Martha was already at the door, clucking with dismay at the sight of him. "Daniel Cooper, you stubborn fool. You should be in a proper hospital bed, not riding across the territory with a bullet hole in you." Despite her scolding, she helped Olivia get Coop settled in the blue room she'd prepared. Olivia placed William in an improvised playpen in the corner while Martha helped Coop out of his bloodied shirt to examine the wound. "Clean exit wound, that's good," Martha muttered. "But it started bleeding again, must have torn the stitches riding like a madman." She looked up at Olivia. "I need hot water, clean bandages, and my sewing kit." While Martha cleaned and restitched the wound, Olivia held Coop's hand. His fingers gripped hers tightly when the pain was worst, but he never made a sound beyond a sharp intake of breath. "I got them," he told her between clenched teeth. "Blackburn took a bullet between the eyes, won't hurt anyone else ever again." "I know," Olivia said softly. "Sheriff Donovan told us, thank you." She squeezed his hand. "But you shouldn't have risked yourself further by riding back alone." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Had a promise to keep." When Martha had finished bandaging the wound, she insisted Coop drink a cup of willow bark tea laced with whiskey for the pain. "Now sleep," she ordered. "That's the best medicine." Coop's eyes were already drooping, but they sought Olivia's face. "Stay." He murmured, his voice slurring slightly. "Just till I fall asleep, of course." Olivia settled in the chair beside the bed, still holding his hand. William was content in his makeshift pen, playing with the wooden horse that was now his favorite toy. Martha slipped out, closing the door softly behind her. In the quiet room, Olivia studied Coop's face, relaxing now as the pain medicine took effect. The hard lines were softened in sleep, making him look younger, more vulnerable. "I missed you," she whispered, not sure if he could hear her. "More than I should have." His fingers tightened briefly around hers, but his eyes remained closed. "Thought of you every day," he mumbled. "You and the boy kept me going." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. "Rest now," she said softly. "We'll be here when you wake up." Coop slept through the remainder of the day and well into the night. Olivia checked on him periodically, bringing fresh water and adjusting his blankets. Martha examined the wound again before retiring, pronouncing it clean and showing signs of proper healing. "He's strong," the older woman assured Olivia, "and he has something to live for now. That makes all the difference." It was near dawn when Olivia, dozing in the chair beside his bed, felt Coop's hand move in hers. She opened her eyes to find him watching her, his gaze clear and alert despite the lingering pain evident in the tightness around his mouth. "You're still here," he said softly. "Where else would I be?" Olivia smiled, smoothing a strand of hair from his forehead. The gesture was unconscious, intimate, and she blushed as she realized it. "How do you feel?" "Like I got kicked by a mule, but I've had worse." His eyes never left her face. "Olivia, there's something I need to say." Her heart quickened. "Yes." "When I was lying in that doctor's office in Virginia City, not sure if I'd make it, all I could think about was getting back here. To you and William," Coop's voice was low, earnest. "I know it hasn't been long, I know you're still grieving. But I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you, not even Rachel." Olivia's breath caught. "Coop, I'm not asking for anything," he continued hurriedly. "Just wanted you to know, in case I'm not as lucky next time." "Next time," alarm sharpened her voice. "You're going after more outlaws." Coop was silent for a moment. "It's my job," he finally said. "What I'm good at." Olivia withdrew her hand from his, rising to pace the small room. "So you'll just keep risking your life until one day you don't come back, is that it?" "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," she interrupted, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. "You're choosing a badge over whatever might be between us." Coop struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. Olivia, listen to me. I've been a lawman for 5 years. It's the only thing that gave my life meaning after Rachel died, but these past few weeks, tracking Blackburn, knowing it was for you, it felt different, like maybe there could be something else, something more. Olivia stopped pacing, turning to face him. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe it's time for a change. His blue eyes held her steadily. If there was a reason to stay in one place, a good reason. Hope unfurled in Olivia's chest, fragile but persistent. And what would be a good enough reason? You, Coop said simply. You and William. The moment stretched between them, fraught with possibility. Then William's cry broke the silence, announcing his morning hunger from the cradle Martha had moved into Olivia's room the night before. I should. Olivia gestured toward the door. Go, Coop said with a small smile. We'll talk more later. Over the next week, as Coop recuperated under Martha's stern supervision and Olivia's gentler care, they did talk. Long, meandering conversations about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Coop told her about growing up on a hardscrabble Kansas farm, about meeting Rachel when she was just 16 and he 20, about the 5 happy years they'd had before her death. Olivia shared stories of her childhood in Pennsylvania, of her courtship with Thomas, of her initial terror and eventual love for the Montana wilderness. In the evenings, when the boarders had retired and Martha was busy with her accounts, they would sit on the back porch. Sometimes they spoke of the future cautiously at first, then with growing conviction. Coop had savings, he told her. Enough to buy a small place outside of town, maybe start a horse ranch. He'd always had a way with horses. I'd have to turn in my badge, he said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the distant mountains. Can't be a rancher and a marshal both. Would you miss it? Olivia asked, William sleeping peacefully in her lap. Coop considered this. Parts of it. The purpose, the knowing I was making a difference, but not the wandering, not the loneliness. His hand found hers in the gathering dusk. Not anymore. 2 more weeks passed. Coop's wound healed steadily, though Martha insisted he continue to rest more than he thought necessary. He spent the time carving toys for William, who had taken to crawling with alarming speed and was fascinated by everything within reach. The bond between the marshal and the baby grew visibly stronger each day. Coop would sit for hours with William on his knee, telling him stories about brave horses and the wide-open plains. In turn, William bestowed upon Coop his first real smile, then his first attempt at a word, a gurgling sound that might have been Coop or simply baby babble. One morning in mid-August, Olivia came downstairs to find Coop fully dressed in his marshal's clothing for the first time since his return. Her heart sank at the sight. You're leaving, she said, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. Just for the day, Coop assured her quickly. Got some business at the land office. He hesitated, then added, thought maybe you'd like to come along, both of you. There's something I want to show you. Curious and relieved, Olivia agreed. An hour later, they were riding in a borrowed buggy Martha's Sunday rig heading out of town toward the northeast. William sat contentedly on Olivia's lap, entranced by the motion and the new sights. They traveled for about 5 miles before Coop turned the buggy onto a narrower track that wound through a stand of pines. When they emerged from the trees, Olivia gasped. Before them lay a small valley, emerald green with summer grass, a clear stream running through its center. A modest cabin stood on a slight rise, weathered but sound, with a barn and corral nearby. Behind it all, the mountains rose majestically against the blue sky. What is this place? Olivia asked, though something in her heart already knew the answer. Coop reined the horse to a stop. Could be ours, he said quietly, if you want it to be. Olivia turned to him, eyes wide. You bought this? Not yet, but I can today. The owner's a widower moving to Oregon to live with his daughter. Coop's eyes searched her face. It's not much. The cabin needs work and the fencing's seen better days, but there's good water, good grazing, room to raise horses and children. Olivia's heart thundered in her chest. Coop, are you asking? I'm asking if you could see a future here with me. He took her hand, his own large one engulfing it. I know it's soon. I know you might not be ready, but I love you, Olivia Stevens. You and this boy have become everything to me, and if you need more time, I'll wait, however long it takes. Tears filled Olivia's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I don't need more time," she whispered. "I think I've known since that first night by the fire when you told me about Rachel, known that my heart was healing, making room for something new. Something I never expected to find again." "Is that a yes?" Coop's voice was rough with emotion. "It's a yes," Olivia confirmed, laughing through her tears. "Yes to this land, yes to a future together, yes to everything." Coop's face broke into a smile so radiant it transformed him. Gently, mindful of William between them, he leaned forward and kissed her a sweet, tender kiss that held the promise of a lifetime. "There's one more thing," he said when they parted. From his pocket, he pulled a small leather pouch. "This belonged to my grandmother. My father gave it to my mother when he asked her to marry him. I'd like you to have it now." Inside the pouch was a simple gold band set with a small, perfect pearl. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed. "Like you," Coop said softly. "May I?" She nodded, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her. "I love you, Daniel Cooper," Olivia said, using his full name for the first time. The words felt right, true, as if they'd been waiting within her heart all along. "And I love you, Olivia Stevens." He grinned suddenly. "Soon to be Cooper, if I have any say in the matter." William chose that moment to let out a happy shriek, waving his arms as if in approval. They both laughed, the sound echoing across the valley, their valley now. "Shall we look at our new home?" Coop asked, nodding toward the cabin. "Yes," Olivia said, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Let's go home." 3 months later, on a crisp November day with the first dusting of snow on the distant peaks, Olivia Stevens became Olivia Cooper in a simple ceremony at the Helena Church. William, now nearly crawling and babbling constantly, was held by a beaming Martha Wilson. Sheriff Donovan stood as Coop's best man, and Miss Parker from the boarding house served as Olivia's bridesmaid. The cabin had been transformed in the intervening months. Coop had repaired the roof, added a second bedroom, and built a stone fireplace that kept the main room cozy even on the coldest nights. Olivia had sewn curtains, planted a late kitchen garden, and filled every corner with the touches that made a house a home. Their closest neighbors, the Johnsons, lived 2 miles away and had quickly become friends, helping with the last of the harvest and bringing a milk cow as a wedding present. "Every growing boy needs milk," Mrs. Johnson had declared, ruffling William's copper hair. That evening, after the small reception at Martha's boarding house, Coop carried Olivia over the threshold of their cabin. William was staying with Martha for the night, her wedding gift to them. "Happy?" Coop asked, setting Olivia gently on her feet but keeping his arms around her. "More than I ever thought possible," she admitted, leaning into his embrace. "Sometimes I think about that day on the prairie, how close we came to never meeting at all, if you hadn't been tracking Blackburn, if you'd taken a different route. But I didn't," Coop said firmly. "And that's what matters, the path that brought us here together." Later, as they lay tangled in the quilts of their marriage bed, Olivia traced the scar on Coop's shoulder, the permanent reminder of his confrontation with the men who had killed Thomas. "No more bullets," she murmured. "Promise me." Coop caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "No more bullets," he agreed. "Just horses and harvests and growing old together, watching our children thrive." "Children?" Olivia raised an eyebrow, a smile playing at her lips. "Plural." "Well," Coop drawled, pulling her closer, "William's going to need siblings, don't you think? A boy should have someone to play with out here in the wilderness." Olivia pretended to consider this. "I suppose that's true, though it might take some practice, this child-making business." Coop's laugh rumbled through his chest. "Practice makes perfect, Mrs. Cooper, and we've got the rest of our lives for that." Spring came to the valley, bringing wildflowers and new life. The small herd of horses Coop had purchased 2 mares, and a stallion had grown with the addition of a gangly foal born in April. The vegetable garden Olivia had planted thrived, and the apple trees behind the cabin showed promise of a good harvest come fall. William, now 14 months old, toddled everywhere, his copper hair gleaming in the sun as he explored his kingdom. He called Coop Papa now, the word having come naturally to his lips one winter evening as they sat before the fire. The sound had brought tears to Coop's eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between them, and there was another miracle growing as well. Olivia's hand rested on the gentle swell of her belly as she stood on the porch, watching Coop work with one of the mares in the corral. Their child conceived in love, expected with joy, would arrive with the autumn leaves. "Come see, Willie," she called to her son, who was busily digging in the dirt nearby. "Papa's teaching Starlight to accept the saddle." William scrambled up and ran to her, his sturdy legs carrying him faster each day. Olivia lifted him, settling him on her hip despite her growing middle. "Papa," William called, waving wildly. Coop looked up, a smile breaking across his face at the sight of them. He secured the mare to the fence post and strode toward the porch, his steps quickening as if he couldn't bear to be apart from them a moment longer than necessary. "There's my family," he said, gathering them both in his arms. Olivia leaned into his embrace, breathing in the scent of him, leather and pine and home. 2 years ago, she had wandered the prairie, desperate and alone with a baby at her breast, not knowing if they would survive another day. Now she stood surrounded by love, with a past honored but not limiting and a future bright with promise. "I was just thinking," Coop said, his hand joining hers on her rounded belly. "If it's a girl, maybe we could call her Rachel, after your first wife," Olivia finished for him. "I think that's beautiful." "And if it's a boy," Olivia smiled up at him, "Thomas, for both our pasts, the people who helped shape us into who we are today." Coop's eyes, blue as the Montana sky, shone with love. "Perfect," he whispered, bending to kiss her, "just like you." As the sun began its slow descent toward the distant mountains, painting the valley in gold and amber, the small family stood together on their porch. The future stretched before them like the vast Montana prairie, wide open, full of possibilities, theirs to shape together. And in that moment, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that this love, this family, this life they were building was exactly where she was meant to be, where they all were meant to be. Home.